Hello and welcome back. Spring and summer is a time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories will inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family make a difference together. Today we will be reading Old Tales Retold, or Perils and Adventures of Tennessee Pioneers by Octavia Zollicoffer Bond. And it's an old one. It's a precious one, so I'm going to try as hard as I can to be gentle with it. So lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, and let's enjoy the story together. The Hornet's Nest. That doesn't sound good. There was a time during the Revolutionary War when the British Army overran North Carolina. The veteran Royal troops under Cruger and Ferguson and Tarleton went about throughout the country just east of the Utica Mountains, burning houses, robbing and abusing the owners, and driving from their homes all who loved liberty. Whose families roamed from place to place, not having where to lay their heads. Women and children fled across the mountains for safety. Some on horseback, some on foot, they toiled over the Unicas to seek refuge among the free-spirited backwoods settlers, Annie, who had never yet bowed the neck to an English king. Onto their simple pioneer homes, the wanderers were kindly welcomed. No door to the Watauga settlement was closed against the homeless. In Carter's Valley and on the Nolichucky River, they were welcomed. There was scarcely a cabin in the border country without its refugee Carolina guests. The families of Colonel Clark, Colonel McDowell, and other Carolinians who were out fighting against the British were comfortably housed in the home of Captain John Sevier on the Nolichucky. So Sevier County is where Dollywood is. So that's Sevier. This is who we're talking about, Captain John Sevier. Wherever the refugees told their story of the hardships they had suffered, the frontiersmen were stirred to more active resistance to the English. They wanted to mount their fleet horses and dash across the border, as they had done at Thickety Fort, and punish the offenders at once. That is the Tennessee spirit. Want to help other people to be independent like they want to be. If only Nolichucky Jack, as they called their beloved Captain Sevier, would be their leader, they felt sure of success, for the British feared him as they would a human hornet, and called the borderland through which he ranged the Hornet's Nest. That is so cool. That's great. While the backwoodsmen were in their restless humor, Colonel Patrick Ferguson recklessly insulted every patriot on the western frontier anew. That seems like a good idea. He was foolhardy enough to send a special messenger from his camp near Gilbert Town, east of the Blue Ridge, direct to King's Meadows, Colonel Isaac Shelby's cattle ranch near the present site of Bristol, with an insolent message to Shelby himself, as well as to Sevier and other border leaders and their followers. Said Ferguson to his courier, in the blindness of his folly, tell that set of banditti to stay at home and keep quiet, or I will cross the mountain and have their hornets' nest burned out. Oh boy. If the British colonel had disturbed an actual nest of hornets, he could not have caused a greater uproar. In hot haste, Colonel Shelby mounted his horse to take the important news to John Sevier, the efficient commander of Washington County, and concert with him for measures of defense. The hardy Shelby, a man of grand size and great endurance, traveled fully 50 miles southward from his ranch before he rode under the crossbeam of the gateway into Sevier's picketed yard. And the log house... My goodness, Indy, what are we doing here? This is a very serious story, and we are... Wow. Okay. Very bendy. In the log house on the Nolichucky, the two soldierly men talked long and anxiously about the affairs of their country. Firmly resolved never to be ruled by prince or king or royal governor, they determined to defend their over-mountain lands against the British army to the last. Though the revolutionary cause seemed to be lost, General Washington himself having lately said, I have almost ceased to hope, they made up their minds to remain unconquered. With a spirit which afterwards gained for their land the title of the Young Switzerland of America. I had never heard that before I read this. It's very interesting. The resolute leaders agreed that though New England and all the other colonies might be forced to yield to the tyranny of England, they would keep one spot in America free or die in the attempt. In considering their plans, Sevier's advice, in accordance with his usual rule of warfare, was to take the war into the enemy's country. With their mountain men, the border soldiers who could stay in the saddle a week at a time, ouch, he believed it would be possible to hunt out the British colonel and bring him to account for his arrogance. Their course being decided upon, the two commanders called a meeting of officers and set to work to collect troops from all parts of the country. Before separating, they appointed Sycamore Shoals, Watauga old fields, as the place of meeting and named a day for the march over the mountains. Colonel Shelby went back to King's Meadows to rouse the backwater men on the Virginia border, while Sevier called around him his own confidential followers. His eyes were full of determination as he said to them, "Go tell my men to come and help me thrash Ferguson." Without delay, each trusty courier sprang to the saddle and sped away to rally the patriots of the frontier country. There was not a cove or valley which they did not penetrate with the message. Nor was there a mountain height on which a cabin might be perched where they did not tell the news. "The redcoats are coming," they shouted aloud. "Rally for Chucky Jack and freedom!" And on they went, through all the thinly settled region, only pausing long enough at each clearing to cry, "Ferguson is Ferguson is not far off, making his boasts that he will come and burn out our hornets' nest and hang our leaders. Rally for Chucky Jack! The redcoats are coming." The refugee women and children trembled at the thought of being hunted out again by the ruthless regulars of Ferguson's army. But when they saw how eagerly each frontiersman took his rifle from the deer-horn rack and flung himself across the horse to answer the summons, they could not but feel secure again. There was swift mounting, and there were hurried partings at the stirring call to arms. The spirit of the backwoods was on fire. Like hornets, indeed, the men were darting out to sting the enemy who threatened their homes, their liberties, and their lives. Sevier had called to them, "Come and help me thrash Ferguson." What more was needed to bring every true man to his side? Volunteers came promptly from mountain and cove. Captain Robert Sevier brought his light horsemen to his brother's aid, and the tall Watauga boys, whose old leader, James Robinson, had lately moved with a number of families still further westward, were eager to follow Sevier. Colonel Shelby and the two valiant Campbells had already collected a considerable force of Virginians to join in the quick, sharp raid Sevier proposed to make across the mountains to whip Ferguson in his camp at Gilberttown. At the same time, McDowell, Hampton, and Cleveland from North Carolina readily agreed to unite with him in carrying out his plan. For some days, the various leaders were actively engaged in preparation, and their evenings far into the night were spent together in consultation over the details of the campaign. Those were busy days for John Sevier, as well as the young mistress of his home, formerly the bonny Kate Sherrill, whose heart and hands were full with ministering to the refugees who had come to them for shelter. The many rooms in Sevier's residence, which was a collection of log buildings added from time to time as they had been needed, were all required for their company now under the rambling roofs. Yet, notwithstanding the usual stress of household duties, Catherine Sherrill found time for numerous acts of charity. Among those to whom she gave daily help was poor Nancy Dyke, who came regularly for a measure of meal and a flitch of bacon. Nancy's worthless husband, a despised Tory, so British, on the British side, had left her and her small children in their hut in the forest the year before, and but for Mrs. Sevier's charity, they would have starved. One morning, preparing to supply the wants of the abandoned family, Mrs. Sevier had turned the great iron key in a smokehouse door when she was startled by a sob from the poor creature at her side. "What ails you, Nancy?" she asked so compassionately that tears started in Nancy's eyes, and with an outcry she threw herself at the kind lady's feet. "You are so good to me," she said between sobs, "that I cannot see danger come nigh to your husband and not tell you what I know." "Danger to my husband?" cried Mrs. Sevier in alarm. "What can you mean? Speak!" The woman hesitated, but the truth was forced from her lips. "Why, ma'am," she faltered, "he's come back to me. Dyke has. Last night there were some bad King's men talking with him outside the door. I heard them through the chink saying Nolichucky Jack does not bar his doors at night. It will be easy work while he sleeps through the country of him and do the king a service. They mean to kill Captain Sevier this very night." Then, frightened at what she had said, Nancy began to beg for mercy from her husband. "Don't let him be hurt," she pleaded. "He was not always the traitor Bill Dyke they know him now. He used to treat me well." Oh, lovely. Her pitiful prayer would have been heard, and the culprit would have been spared for the sake of his wife if the matter had rested with Captain Sevier. But the men of Nolichucky were excited to indignation when they heard of this Tory plot to take the life of their commander. Indeed, they could scarcely wait an hour to get their hands on Bill Dyke, yet when they caught him that night, they were merciful enough not to hang the criminal. They only stripped him of his clothing and gave him in his place an ample coat of tar and feathers. So remember, tar and feathering It sounds bad. It's not pleasant, but it's pine sap. So it's not tar like we use on roads. So it's not boiling. It's meant to humiliate more than, injure. Turned loose in this sorry plight, the wretched man went flying across the mountain like an evil bird as straight as he could to go to Ferguson's camp. There he told the gathering of the backwoodsmen and offered to guide the British troops into the heart of the frontier country by an easy route. So lovely. That's what they get for sparing his life, apparently. But when Ferguson heard what a stir his threats had caused, he backed quickly, as far as he could, towards the interior of North Carolina. Having reached what he thought was a safe position, he stopped and made the boastful declaration, as per usual with this guy, that as to those barbarians from the backwoods, he did not fear them, Jade. You should. With blasphemous oaths, he defied any power in heaven or earth to overcome him. Wow. Colonel Ferguson did not then know the lesson that was afterwards taught him, that men who are fighting for their homes are always to be feared, no matter how few their numbers. Now, when you've got something to save, your home, your land, your home, literal home, your families, yeah, you're going to fight with all you have. And apparently, when a guy is too boastful for the Tennesseans, they'll come and help too. On the 25th day of September, 1780, men, women, and children, black and white, all who could walk or ride, poured into the camp at Watauga Old Fields and the rendezvous of the border troops. Never before in the western wilds had there been such a gathering of people as met there near the old fort where Elizabethton now stands. Under the shade of the oaks that fringed the old field, the volunteers were grouped surrounded by friends who cheered, comforted, and advised while they waited for the order to march. Pride flashed in Nolichucky Jack's eyes as he rode up and down the field reviewing his men. Reminds me of Lord of the Rings. Awesome. His were soldiers of whom a commander might well be proud, though they were dressed in homespun hunting shirts and leggings, fringed and tasseled, with bucks' tails in their hats for plumes, and had only rations of parched corn and the deer hide knapsacks on their backs. To a man, they were remarkable for height and strength of body, and each one of them was a sure marksman with his flintlock gun, as well as skillful in the use of the knife or tomahawk in his belt. Severe's erect figure, wherever it appeared, was the signal for hearty cheers and greetings. Every man in the ranks was his devoted friend. That's amazing. Every man in his ranks was a devoted friend. Oh, this must have been some guy. He had something to say to each man, with special personal kindness. To all alike he said in the quiet, magnetic voice which made his lightest word a command, "We must whip Ferguson." The cry was caught up from man to man, spreading from rank to rank and gathering force as it went, till the Watauga hills resounded with the shout, "We must whip Ferguson!" The ardor of Severe's own spirit was ablaze in every heart. It seemed a propitious moment to begin the march. Yet there was a pause and a few moments of waiting for something of importance which was first to be done. Not until the blessing of God had been asked for their undertaking would the Patriot band be ready to sweep out on the trail after Ferguson. The Reverend Samuel Doak had been in camp all day, preparing the soldiers' souls for the dangers they were soon to be met. It was the same Parson Doak who had brought the first collection of books worthy to be called a library in the wilderness of the Southwest. On leaving his alma mater, the College of Princeton, as a young man, he had packed his books upon his horse and had driven the laden beast across Alleghenies and across Virginia, himself walking behind to the new settlement on Watauga. There he had founded a college and a church in which he eloquently exhorted his hearers to cease to do evil and learn to do well. And now his people called upon the good man, whose smile was a benediction in itself, to order for them and their cause a final prayer. Making a wide circle, the backwoodsman surrounded the parson in his black skull cap, long cloak, knee breeches, and buckled shoes. Reverently, with bared heads, they bowed in silence, while Father Doak placed them in care of the giver of all victories. The prayer ended, he spoke to the patriots as only he could, burning words that sent the blood tingling through their veins. When at last he raised his voice in the command, "Go forth, my brave men, go forth with the sword of the Lord and of Gideon." It was answered by a shout that seemed to shake the earth. With one impulse, the men sprang to their saddles and started up the stony mountain path, calling back again, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" In long Indian file they toiled up and upward, still shouting, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" The sound mingling with the other cry, "We must whip Ferguson!" was borne to the people in the campground below, who still stood with prayers and blessings on their lips, straining ears and eyes after the departing sons, husbands, fathers, brothers, until the last soldier was out of view. The men from the hornets' nest were off in their swarm after Ferguson. How they stung his army and silenced his wicked boasts in the battle of King's Mountain is a story to be told hereafter. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. We'll see you for the next one.